So that's the best I can do. Let them be a guide for our lives in this world. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. We, yeah. Uh, I, those of you in the middle, you're probably not going to be able to see all of this. If you can look right or left, maybe you can pick up. It's just going to be the very bottom, I think, that's hidden. So we'll do the best that we can with it. We were talking about verses 8 and 9 that of Ecclesiastes 10. That he who digs a pit may fall into it, and a serpent may bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits logs may be endangered by them. Now, we made the point there last week that that there are those who study this and comment on it and believes that this could have a reference to the ungodly. They're trying to entrap those that are godly, or just others there for that matter. And we looked at an example of this in the 7th Psalm, verses 12 through 16. Then, and we won't, oh, well, now I know when that's not, there we go. And we won't read that entire psalm again. We read it there as class closed last week, but look particularly at verse 15 there, and you'll see that thought. He has dug a pit and hollowed it out, and has fallen into the hole there which he made. And again, this is an example of somebody actually setting a trap there and falling into it. Now, in the scriptures, there you can find any number of men, of women for that matter, there who made plans then either for good, primarily for bad, there, and those plans backfired on them. And you can go all the way back there to the beginning, I suppose, with Adam and Eve there and their plans there to eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, obviously backfired on them. Move on up to Cain in his murder of Abel. And again, you can go through the entire Old Testament up to the time of King Saul there, and we could see his plans to eliminate there the future King David there from the equation ended up backfiring on him there. But I think the best example there of this there that we can find, somebody planning the demise of someone else, and they ended up there dying because of it. The book of Esther. There you will find this in Esther chapter 7, verse 10. And we're not going to undertake there a study of the book of Esther there this morning. There, but at least 4 primary characters, and maybe more. Esther being there the primary there character in it, the Jewish daughter there who would become the queen of Persia. There married King Ahasuerus. Then Esther's guardian there, her cousin there was Mordecai there who had raised Esther, and of course wicked Haman there who had a plan there to eliminate all the Jews there from the kingdom of Persia, and had actually arranged there for Mordecai there to be hanged there. And we find out in that 7th chapter, Haman's plan was exposed. He became terrified. There it says, which is the way of a lot of evil people there when they are discovered, their bravery there goes out the back door and they become terrified. He begged for his life there. Wish was not granted, and we find in verse 10 of chapter 7, they hanged Mordecai on the gallows, or they hanged Haman, rather, on the gallows for which he had prepared for Mordecai. Again, a prime example there of that interpretation here, verses 8 and 9, that I don't think it's probably as complicated as that. I think the explanation for it is a little simpler, and that's this. There, a fool rushes ahead with little forethought, while a wise man foresees potential dangers and takes precautions. Everyday living there tells us that we should be careful and expect the unexpected. And if you look at those two verses, there, digging a pit, they're breaking through a wall, quarrying stones, splitting logs, felling trees, if you will. That's all hard work. Every bit of that. Those aren't passive things. Those are very active things. They require strength. They require a man or a woman, I suppose, if she's involved here, there to be at her best. But this shows us that even a man at his strongest, at his best, there can run into circumstances which are not favorable to him. Now, we can make there, I believe, a pretty easy physical application there of these verses. There, again, with all four of these things, with any number of other things there that you might want to add to it, whether you are at home, there, whether you're at work, whether you're at school, whether you're on the playground, that we realize that there are some probabilities in this life that we have to deal with. There, cutting that tree, felling a tree, then you cut the tree, the probability is it's going to fall to the ground. The possibility is it may not fall where you would like for it to. It may fall in a completely different place. Get in your vehicle to go somewhere. Then the probability is you're going to start the vehicle. Then probability is you'll get out of your driveway. Possibilities are you get flat tire, car breakdown, accident. Possibilities are endless. Probabilities you can recognize. Possibilities you need to plan for. There, you need to try as best as you're able to make plans. Therefore, possibilities. There, you exercise all the safety measures that you can. There, whether it's a helmet, whether it's goggles, whether it's rubber gloves, whether it's those horrible masks there that we were wearing a few years ago. There, you can see all those things as potential deterrents to things that you did not plan for. There, in my garden, that I keep an old hoe handle. I don't know how many years it's been since there was an actual hoe on the end of it, and I keep a big old cedar stick in there. I use those things for a couple of reasons. One, that if I'm on my knees, if I've got that hoe handle in my hand, I can stand up a little easier. You know, gardening's great there until you're on your knees and you need to stand back up. There, you know, it's easy for somebody young. I hadn't been young for a while. There, Jessica, you could do it. You could get straight up. I can't. Also helps me keep my balance there as I'm stepping over things. You know, I can plant that, and my tendency to fall there, it is reduced a little bit. And the other thing I keep those for, there, it's been particularly this year, there, as things in that garden there have gone absolutely crazy, growth-wise. And I will not stick my hands down there in those cucumber vines until I put the stick in it first there and pulled them back. Think of this man that broke through a wall, and there was the snake, the serpent, the viper waiting on the other side. So again, you make the, and I've never moved a snake out of the garden this way, but when I'm out there in the morning, that stick will go in it before my hands do. It's because we have to make preparations as we consider safety and the possibilities of other things. A spiritual application there. And we don't always, particularly through a book like Ecclesiastes, I don't think we always make the spiritual application there that we need to, that we should. Consider the 10th chapter of Matthew, verse 16. There, the instructions of Jesus there to the 12 before they went there on the limited commission. I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Let's look at some of the context there surrounding that, verses 7 through 11. Now, we see as the 12 was about to leave, they weren't necessarily going to be leaving for favorable conditions. They were to preach, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. They were to heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. They weren't to take any money with them. They provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag. They weren't to take extra clothing. Don't take two tunics. If I understand this, don't take extra sandals, don't take extra staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. They weren't even to make plans for a place to stay. There, verse 11, whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy and stay there till you go out. Now let's skip down there to verse 16 where we read from. Look at verse 17. Beware of men, for they will deliver you up to council, scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Down to verse 21. Brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will raise up against parents and cause them to be put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. There. But he endures to the end will be saved. Now, you may be different then, but if I'm about to go somewhere, there, work for the church or otherwise, and I'm told before I leave, this is going to be my circumstance, I'm inclined to sit back down, and say, can't somebody else do this? There, the 12 didn't have that option. There, they went there where they were sent under very, very difficult circumstances. So you can see that no food, no money, no extra clothing. You're going to be threatened physically. You're going to have to come up there before the local authorities. Then you are going to be as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be as wise as serpents, as harmless as doves. There, I believe that's why the Apostle Paul, Colossians chapter 4, verse 5, said this, walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. There. You be careful when you're dealing with those who are on the outside. Outside of the kingdom, there is who is referring here to. Similar thought in Ephesians 5:15 and 16. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. Not only do you have to be wise, that you also need to be careful who you're traveling with. Proverbs chapter 13, there, verse 20, he who walks with wise men will be wise, there, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. So again, even you, as good as you might be, as righteous as you might be, if you choose a foolish traveling companion, they just may drag you down there along with them. So we have to be careful. Now, a takeaway for us here, there, and I think it's important there whether we're dealing in the spiritual realm, then matters of the church, whether we are dealing with the physical world. There, the 12 had to deal with both. They were sent on a spiritual mission, but had to deal with physical obstacles. We have to understand that in the world there aren't any rules. They are not. This concept of a fair fight, don't teach your children that. Don't teach them. They may encounter a fair fight because there's no such thing. There try to be. I mean, there are parents who will put their youngsters in maybe a self-defense class of some sort with other youngsters whose parents they may or may not know have put them in the same class, and they have the competition, and everything's fine because all the kids are playing by the rules. But you put those same kids in the real world, and they're confronted with a physical danger, and they try to play by those rules, they're probably not going to walk away from that confrontation. So this is important there for us. Question, does Satan play fair? No. No. That's why it says, or he's described as a ravenous wolf. That's why in Ephesus, there the elders were told that there would be those wolves in sheep's clothing. Their deception there was and is there a primary circumstance that every one of us either have dealt with, we may be dealing with it now, there to some degree. There, I've no way of knowing what anybody out here is dealing with there outside of my own family. Might you have to deal with it this afternoon, tomorrow? Well, I hope you don't. I hope I don't either. But if we do, then we have to remember this admonition that we are sheep. They're in the midst of wolves. We have to be wise. As serpents, I don't know how wise a serpent is. I don't intend to get close enough to really learn more about it. Harmless as doves, we understand that is to describe our demeanor. Anybody else? Okay. This thought continues. There, the almost comical side of foolishness. If the axe is dull and he does not sharpen its edge, then he must exert more strength. Now, again, this is talking there about that fool. Then fools never learn. They do not learn. While it takes their time to stop and sharpen the blade, the time saved at the end of the day, not to speak of the extra physical exertion, there will be worth the investment. And, and some of you can relate to this, but me and my brother said as we grew up there on that old farm, then it seems like that there was never enough time to fix something right the first time. There. But we always found time to fix it right the second time. There. When we could have saved a lot. And we were in a hurry, as people on the farm are, because time is critical to you. There. We weren't in as big a hurry as Daddy was. We'll say that we were in a hurry to go home. There's what me and Freddie were. But we always found that time there to do it over. There, when we could have, just for a little bit of extra time, maybe an extra $1 or $2, have fixed it right the first time. We've both split a lot of wood. Then, so I understand this concept there of having the right tool, there of having that tool as prepared as you can, because having something wrong, and again, that's hard work. We were never fortunate enough to have a hydraulic splitter. Me and Freddie were the splitters, and weather like this is when we were doing it. This 100-degree weather with a heat index of whatever, and Daddy worked us to death. Even being that much older, he was almost 30 years older than me, and would literally work us to death out there. But we learned, first off, listen when he's telling us, and do it the right way. And our day is not as difficult. Who else? When you start to put something together, then I won't ask for a show of hands. I could among women, and I think a lot of hands would go up. I'm not as sure as many men's hands are going to go up. Read the directions first. Yeah, I say, Angela, yeah. You took that as a confession, didn't you? Well, it's true. Sharon has asked me many times, what did you do with those directions? And I said, I don't know. They're probably still in the box. I can remember one Christmas Eve night. Ryan, you probably too. Maybe not. I stayed up almost all night long putting a Barbie house together. And I probably ended up there with the directions there. At some point, then I don't cook. I told you that last week. If I did, I would have to read the recipe before I tried to bake a cake. Now, it's not going to happen. Now, I say something to Sharon occasionally about, well, I can cook it, and I barely get it out of my mouth before she says, no, you cannot. I said, well, I could learn. She said, no, you cannot. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm going to have to clean up your mess. She said, and I'm not. And I'm satisfied that most of you women out here, the cakes that you've baked for a while, you may not need that recipe anymore. You've committed it to memory. But at one time in your life, you needed instruction, whether it's from your mama, whether it's from your grandmother, whether it's from the recipe that you have discovered of your grandmother's that you had to learn, and you learned without the recipe, it might look like that cake there, but odds are good it's going to taste like something else. Getting out the map or the GPS before you get lost. You do that, Billy? Billy said no. I suspect now this is a badge of honor there for a lot of men. I know how to get there. Well, I can remember having to get out in the middle of the night. Before I had such a thing as a GPS there with a stack of maps there to places, towns I'd never been. But I had to have those. And odds were always good that I would spend, after I got to the town, a little while looking. These wasn't big towns, some of them. And inevitably, I have to pull over get out a flashlight and start reading that map. Whereas, if you do it before you go, the odds are going to be that your journey is going to be much less difficult. A GPS can take a lot of the effort out. It can also have you turning left across a median into a river. So you still need to make, there's some better plans than this. Comments, questions? Virginia, okay. Virginia's saying she was actually on top of a bridge and her GPS telling her to turn left right there. I've had that same experience there. I have. Who was over here? Was that you, Billy? Okay.
There's nothing wrong with little side trip adventures in your main journey. You can be amazed at what you can find.
Billy, I don't disagree with you. Then, occasionally the people riding with you, there do have some objections to. I can still hear Sharon say, I think you were supposed to turn right back there. And I said, I'll turn around and go back. I've turned around many times. Oh. Ryan's talking about in Washington, D.C., having a miserable experience there with his GPS. And, I'm not sure how you avoid that. There are ways. I mean, you can compare that to the map. You can, but the last several years, I've grown accustomed to taking my GPS for granted and whatever it says, that, unless I already know there that it's wrong. Do what, Pat? Women, yeah, Pat says women will stop and ask. Yeah, I've done the same thing. As you mentioned Memphis, it just made me think. And again, this is about preparation, is what we're talking about here. So sometimes there's not as much time to prepare as you would like. Sherry, you remember the trip we made to Memphis? Me and you, Freddie went in a separate vehicle because he was headed to the med when the piano fell on his foot. No, don't ask about that. I'll tell you after service, or he can tell you. Remember, there were some people at your house. I knew where the med was. I've had to be there working there, but they said, we know exactly where we're going. Just follow us. And we got into downtown Memphis, and they had no idea where they were going. I told Sherry, I said, you call them, tell them to get behind us, and we will get them there. Again, not pleasurable, but there are lessons to be learned in these circumstances. Again, as it deals with preparation, consider 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. The translation most of you are going to be familiar with from the King James. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. If you take the King James, they're literally right there. For a Christian, there's no better preparation for day-to-day life than study. So we can take a lesson away from that. It's not the best translation there of that verse there, but the other translation, you can make the same application. From the New King James, be diligent. Be diligent there to present yourself approved to God. Same principle. if you're diligent, you're not working at it one day a week, one day a month. You're working on it every day, then probably more than once a day. So again, preparation here, that should be our takeaway. Anybody else? Okay, let's add the rest of verse 10 there to that. Wisdom has the advantage of giving success. Everyone, that's every one of us in this room this morning, everybody listening at home, everyone wants success. Solomon reminds us that the secret to success is what? He says so right here. What gives the advantage? Wisdom. Wisdom is the key to your success. Wisdom begins with what? Yes. Proverbs 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord. There is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Remember the 14th Psalm, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God there. But here Solomon says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now, Proverbs 9:10, that's the verse that Steve referenced. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And we get wisdom where? According to James, then we get it from God. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given him. Okay, let's also add verse 11 there to this. If the serpent bites before being charmed, there is no profit for the charmer. It's from your book. Then you can almost see Solomon wink as he says, if a snake charmer is trying to charm tourists out of their money, and his snake bites the tourist, it's 100% guarantee that he will lose money. Now, I was going to do it, and I forgot, because the internet is filled with pictures of religious folks who believe that they can take up a serpent, and if it bites them, it won't harm them. It's also full of stories, accounts of people who were bitten by that serpent and died. There, and you can see these pictures of these people holding a rattlesnake, and the thing is threatening. Yes, that snake can't be charmed there, but there are still places in the world then where you see a cobra then being charmed there, whether it's by music or by something else, and maybe it puts it into a docile state of some sort. Again, it's when I'm standing way back there if I'm going to observe that. Now, to be fair here, then let's consider the New King James, because it's a different reading. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. Now, that's what the New American Standard reads, and essentially every translation. The babbler is no different. There, a direct comparison here. There to a snake that hasn't been charmed and is going to bite. There, to a babbler. There, a babbler bites, do they not? Yeah, they do. In a different way. They're not going to bite your hand. They're not going to bite your ankle. They're going to bite you where it hurts the most, and that's inside. There, those words there of that babbler. Look at again the book of James chapter 3. There in verse 8, no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Whichever way you want to go with your translation, I don't know there why the King James, the New King James, translate that this way, unless it's because of the next several verses there that follow this that deal there with the tongue. That may be the reason. Again, I don't know. There, I've consulted every word-for-word translation that I can find, and I've looked for reasons. Nobody's got one, except it's there. And understand this, whichever translation you prefer, then the lesson is the same. If you don't have control of the circumstance, then you're in trouble. Then, whether it's your tongue, whether it's a snake, there you've got trouble on your hands. Who else? Anybody? Wisdom plans things in advance. Then, otherwise, it's too late. After the, they say everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the nose. There, and I understand that. There, and it's the truth. You can't plan for an accident. You can't plan for any circumstance after it's already happened. You can't do it. There, you have to look ahead, consider possibilities as opposed to probabilities, and make plans according. Will they work? Maybe. Maybe not. Our lives are unpredictable. Time and chance happen to all. There. Anybody else? Okay. A fool proves he's a fool when, number one, he opens his mouth. There in verses 12 and 13, look at verse 12 first. Words from the mouth of a wise man are gracious, while the lips of a fool consume him. The idea there, choose your words carefully. Look at this quote there from Rudyard Kipling, the writer of the Jungle Book, there amongst other things. There, words are, of course, the most powerful drug used by mankind. Now, think about that. Again, that's not Bible. It's not there. But think of words as a powerful drug. There, words can be used to comfort. There, to medicate somebody, so to speak. There, just by calming them down. Words can be used there to incite anger, to incite grief. There, to even incite hallucinations. You can do that. There are people you can convince of absolutely anything. That it does not matter what it is. Our time's almost gone. So some of you have heard me talk about this. I think most of you have not. It's been over 20 years ago that I had to go see that a man that had just moved to Arkansas from Texas. I went as a favor to a doctor. There, he said, I know you can't get paid. There, he said, but would you? And I said, well, yes. Got my business took care of, and this man wanted to show me something. And I could tell he was proud. So you could just tell. He went to the back of his house, and he came back up front, Billy with an axe. He had an axe. Now, this just wasn't any axe. This was the very axe that George Washington had used to chop down the cherry tree. Yes. Now, he was convinced by what he had read. I asked him, where'd you get that? I didn't have the heart to tell him. He said, I bought it on the internet. And, there is I don't know where he bought it, who sold it to him, but I suspect he wasn't the only one that bought one. There. But he was unbelievably proud there of that axe. Wasn't rusty. The handle was pretty and shiny. You would have never thought there that thing was a couple of 100 years old there. But again, I didn't pursue that. The words of Jesus, Matthew 12, verses 36, 37. But I tell you, every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. And that ought to scare everybody in this auditorium there as we think about things that we have said. Oh, the Lord said we're going to be judged by those words. Careless words, intentional words. You'll either be justified, you will be condemned by those. The spoken words. Yeah, there are other types than spoken. Proverbs 15, verse 2. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness. Proverbs 18, 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Then, written words. There are folks that seem to think that, if I just write this, maybe, well, some folks use written words to hide behind them because they don't have to look somebody in the eye there for something in particular. But written words sometimes can be more powerful than spoken words. I might misunderstand you, something you speak. If you write it to me, I may read it several times till I understand. Jessica?
About written words. When my mother passed away, I can go back and look at her recipes that she's handwritten, or a card that she sent on my birthday, or whatever, and I get such comfort of seeing her handwriting and something so of the recipe or something.
Yeah, and you know what, and that's a good point, because it does show. Now, I doubt when your mother wrote that, her intention probably wasn't to comfort you there. But, this goes to the point that our words can have consequences. They can have results that we did not intend, and that's an excellent example. Our mother wrote on everything. It didn't matter what it was. There, glassware, pictures, whatever, she wrote on it. Unspoken words. Well, but think about that. Then, how many times have there been in your life when you could have said something there that might have offered encouragement, might have built faith, there, any number of things, give somebody hope. Think about those unspoken words there. A friend, a relative is grieving, and all you do is just put your arm around their shoulder. Don't say anything because you don't have to. They know they're what it is. Let's look at hymns. There, I haven't heard the first bell. Has it gone? It already did. Second one hasn't, has it? Okay. All right, then I got time to do this. Hymns that we sing. Some of them we don't sing anymore. They're that relay this idea of words. Go Tell It on the Mountain. There. I probably hadn't heard that song in 50, 60 years. There. But it emphasizes the importance of words. I love to tell the story. We still sing that there, and I think all of us can understand there the importance of the spoken word there. Ancient words. There, we sing that because words are old. There doesn't make them antiquated. It doesn't mean they're no longer usable. That hymn, Ancient Words, teaches us that angry words. Yeah, I don't need to say anything else about that. Wonderful words of life. They're wonderful hymn. That's the second bell. I got two more of these. Break thou the bread of life. They're the same thought there as wonderful words of life. And lastly, you never mention him to me. This small group of hymns, and you can probably add to that list, they cover the spoken word, the written word, and unspoken words. Appreciate the comments and questions. We will finish this lesson next week and hopefully start their lesson 11.